Hi, this is Eric Settle, and welcome to the third episode of Pinot and Policy. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, 2025, and I'm here with my co-host, Rafe D'Amico. Hi, Rafe.
Hey Eric, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, as you know, Pinot and Policy are conversations about government policy, politics, with some wine and levity mixed in. I'm Eric Settle, former candidate for Pennsylvania Attorney General, is a media executive and a wine enthusiast, and we're bringing different perspectives to these topics. As a
I know
boomer and a Gen Xer, you'll find we have commonalities and differences as we explore these issues.
most of the time I feel like we have commonalities, but our hope is to have civil discourse on what at times can be contentious issues. So we hope we can better understand each other, whether it's just Eric and I talking or other people commenting, other people listening, so that we can better understand the varying perspectives in the US and the world.
Because there's a lot going on in the world, and we're trying to navigate it with you out there.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today, Eric? Lots to choose from.
Well, I guess I will start with what's going on in the world. As you know, Donald Trump yesterday signed an executive order that purported to freeze almost half the federal budget. He specifically exempted Social Security and Medicare, which is the program for old people, but left everything else on the table. And this began a crazy day in Washington.
Yeah, so what does that mean exactly? And how is that impacting us? Because you hear that and you think, okay, so it just stops? Like I don't have access to that anymore if I was using that?
Right. I mean, he basically instructed OMB to freeze temporarily for a month all federal programs that use federal funds to provide assistance in multitude ways. So you just, and it, when an order like that gets submitted, it then requires people to implement it. And shockingly, although the order was not supposed to go into effect until 5 o'clock today, at about noon, the Medicaid portal, that is the way that states access money from the federal government for their Medicaid programs, those were all frozen with a banner that said, due to executive orders, funding may not be appropriate.
So no warning, no heads up, this is coming down. People literally logged on and or attempted to log on and couldn't get access what they needed.
Right, right, exactly right. In other words, this thing was issued last night. No one knew it was coming. And only because of media coverage did people know that this wasn't a hack or some system failure, but in fact something that was intended.
So that has a lot to unpack, but let me ask you a question because I'm just trying to understand what's why. I'd like to imagine anybody does something like this because there's an end game. They're trying to accomplish something. So, at least from your perspective, what is Trump and the administration looking to accomplish by doing this?
Well, I think they're trying to do two things. One is I think they're trying to reset the federal budget.
Right.
They are trying to undo much of the programs that were put in place in the last 4 years
Hmm.
from the previous administration. They were very concerned about the Green New Deal. They were very concerned about DEI initiatives. So I think, if I put myself in the head of the president, this was a way to kind of reset the equation in the budget.
So, is this like from a business perspective? Is this the equivalent of zero-based budgeting? It's like, you know what? We're just going to start from scratch, start everything from zero, and build it from there. And is it also just another, we keep talking about this, it seems like the theme. Is this just another example of the way Trump negotiates? It's like, I'm taking everything off the table, and if you want it back, then I need to get something for it.
Yeah, I think, Rafe, that's very possible. Now, I mean, the difference between a business and what we have here is there were laws, all the spending laws, all these programs were passed by appropriation bills in the Congress and signed by the President of the United States, who was then president. So, yeah, I think, is this an example of how he kind of operates? I think he is in a position where even if his lawyers were saying, Mr. President, you probably can't do this, he said, watch me. Okay. And so he did it. And he's causing enormous disruption And I don't think it's interesting because as the story developed today, the White House press secretary, all of 27 years old, Carolyn Levitt, showed up today for her first press conference, and she explained, "Oh, that wasn't what we meant. We
Standing
we
before
didn't."
a firing squad.
Right. And I didn't have a chance to watch it, but it probably was kind of fun to see what happened. But she said, no, 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 it's only stuff related to DEI and the executive orders and the Green New Deal.
So, yeah, you bring up an interesting question. If legislation is passed through Congress and Congress approves it and president signs it, then can a subsequent president then just get rid of it through an executive order?
No, that's the point. Laws. So here's the thing. So one of the things the president did on his first day in office was to overturn 78 executive orders that were signed by President Biden. Okay, he can do that because the power of the executive vests in the executive, but then goes away. But what these are actual laws that cannot cannot be undone by the prior president, has to be undone by the Congress, or theoretically undone by the Supreme Court by invalidating, deeming a statute unconstitutional.
So given that sequence that you talked about and that framing, when could a local government or somebody even in the federal government actually put their foot down and stand up to any president and say, no, sir, this isn't how our government works. I'm not doing this. And even if it doesn't come from Washington, is there any recourse locally from a government perspective?
Well, sure. In other words, the thing is that and what you're seeing today is actually that first step, which is attorney generals of large Democratic states have brought suit today to enjoin the order on the basis that that order is illegal. It's affecting them because they're going to lose money that they have a legal right to, and that it's an unlawful order. And to
So that's interesting. And are they falling in line? Are these state attorney generals falling in line basically by party?
Sure. No, so for example, all the attorney generals that are doing this are all the Democratic attorney generals. And one of the things that, you and I worked on when I was running for attorney general was this conversation that said an attorney general of a state, when something comes out of Washington, they should look at it and say, is this good or bad for my state? Okay. And not, did it come from a Democratic president 2 weeks ago or a Republican president today? And unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, we elected Dave Sunday, and he, as a Republican attorney general, he has not taken on that activity. I don't know what his position is as it relates to this, but there's no question that a state attorney general would look at this act and say, this is detrimental to the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Right, because it's ideally you want an attorney general who's viewing it through a very objective lens, not a lens of party perspective. And whether you're a Republican or Democrat, independent or whatever, we have a government that is set up a certain way.
Right. There are rules and some of the yeah, we can say.
People have a tendency where when something like this happens and you hear it through the media, they automatically, if you voted for Trump, you're most likely going to say, oh, well, this is good. This is what they should be doing. I like it. And if you didn't vote for Trump, you're going to say, oh, this is awful. He's overstepping. This is classic Trump. But I would hope everybody could take a step back and look at it and say, well, whether you're right, left, or indifferent, how is our government set up? And I think you just kind of explained it,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
this
That's the
explains how our
right.
government is set up.
Exactly. So, for example, if the president wants to make changes to the federal budget, okay, he has an opportunity going forward. He has an opportunity going forward to go to the Congress, where you have both houses of Congress controlled by the Republican Party, to say, here are programs I want to get rid of. Here are things I want to do. And he has the ability to do those things. Okay. But when you do those things, it's in the natural order of legality. In other words, it's how our system sets up. And what he did today, which is so typical of how he operates, is he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And, you know, it's interesting. While you and I have been recording this, a judge has enjoined the freeze order till February 3rd. So a federal judge in Washington said basically what you and I are saying is, Mr. President, you can change the budget, but you can't change a budget that already existed. You
Right.
can't stop. In other words, people have a right to rely on what was law a week ago to
And
live their lives.
And at the end of the day, we don't live in an autocracy. We don't live in a monarchy, right? Like we've got three branches of government. There's a certain process for legislation to get passed. And what I've always been fascinated with is how the various presidents over the years and decades, centuries have have operated within that gray area. And it's rare you see a president that is wants to have a very strong executive branch and to get closer to being more of an autocracy or a monarchy. And it's rare where you actually see people kind of put their hands up and say no, that's too much if they're of the same party, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to stand up to someone who's the leader of your party to say this isn't right. And that's where I said to somebody today, is it bad enough now? And I said, well, yes. I said, but if that federal judge doesn't overturn this order, it's going to be worse. So what's nice about, what we've always talked about with this president is, coming in for a second time is, do the guardrails hold up? Do the sort of fundamental basic rules still apply to him? And so far, we see this with the birthright citizenship case, which has now been frozen. And with this, that's now been frozen, we see the system is still working.
So far. So how do you think this plays out? And do you think there are any Republicans that actually draw a little line in the sand?
I think it's too early. I think it's too early. I think there's nobody. Well, we were talking about the idea that, Mitch McConnell, could be a guardrail that we haven't had before. And ironically enough, because for those of you, can look at the world from a more progressive way, Mitch McConnell has been sort of the evil empire who did all sorts of stuff in the United States Senate to make sure that the Supreme Court now has, a very, super majority, a 6-3 majority. He was very Machiavellian in terms of getting stuff done. Yet this week, when Pete Hegseth came up for a vote, he voted no, along with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, two people who have been kind of out of the mainstream and be willing to say no to the president. But the fact that Mitch McConnell is now joining that rank is a really interesting guardrail because they only need one more senator to be able to block, to not allow the Senate to get to 50. Don't to get to, because 50 you get to then break the tie.
And let's just take a minute too, because you're talking about, Secretary of Treasury, right? The
No, no, Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense did make it through,
He
nonetheless.
did. He got first time a cabinet member got their job based on a vice president breaking the vote.
And since we did mention it, since I mentioned it, the Secretary of Treasury was also approved.
He was, and his numbers were much stronger. I mean, still a number of opponents. I think. Look, on the Democratic side, there are people who just want to be a opponent, but that person seems like he's a quality person, and also the highest ranking LGBT person, to serve in the federal government.
How about it? Pretty cool.
Yeah,
Pete Buttigieg, obvious trailblazer there too. Uh, great to see that carrying on, especially in a Republican administration like the Trump administration, let's call a spade a spade. They're typically not known for their LGBTQ outreach, right? Um,
No,
so nice to see that
no,
happen,
and the president has taken a full shot at the transgender community.
right?
So in a way that we've never seen a president do before. So yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see. And look, I think there are good people who have stepped up to serve, and he seems like he's one of them.
Right, and more than qualified, right? His credentials are impeccable.
Yeah, he's a classic sort of Treasury Secretary guy. Came from very humble beginnings, worked on Wall Street, actually worked for George Soros, which, again, these names become these kind of these buzz names. Worked for George Soros, became very successful. Yeah, he's like, oh, right. It's like it's the boogie straw man.
But it's great because obviously, it's like more than qualified position based on merit, and it's like he just happens to be gay, right? He obviously got it purely based on merit, just happens to be gay, that's the type of promotion we want to see,
Right. That's what we want in America. People rise on their ability and not on other things that are out of their control.
right? Right. So it'll be interesting to see how Mitch McConnell continues with his potential opposite. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting point you bring up. Could he be the next version of Senator John McCain, who was just an amazing force in the Senate and obvious incredible legacy that he leaves behind, especially with how he responded to Trump's first term in office. It has been a whirlwind, an absolute whirlwind since the inauguration. Just a flurry of executive orders, and it gives me this feeling of like, what's next, and like I wonder how long this little frenzy is going to last, and will we get to a point, we as like a public, where, and this is a double-edged sword, where these executive orders and these massive announcements, almost we become jaded to them, where the people stop paying attention and almost stop caring. There's a big danger there, right? I mean,
Well,
we
yeah.
don't want it to take over our lives with a 24-hour news cycle, but at the same time, we have to remain very, aware and vigilant in what's going on with these things that are going to affect our lives and the lives of our communities.
Well, and that's why today's. So I think one of the things that they're trying to do, this expression's been used, is flood the zone, which is put so many issues on the table that it can't get covered enough. Is that the reason people know about things, most people, is because the news media, regardless of silo, reports on it. So I think that was part of the strategy. I think what happened today was, I think, real pushback when people in red states and blue states discovered that what this meant was that FEMA no longer had money to help the people in Los Angeles, and the food stamp program was closing down. I mean, so I think this was a this was maybe a little bit of an error on the president's part that sort of engaged people to say, oh, that's what this means. Now, again, it's always this question of is who hears what. And, one of the things that I always like to do when one side or the other does something wrong is go flip on the opposition channel.
Right.
So I don't know I haven't had a chance today to monitor Fox, but I suspect they'll talk about the president's mandate to shake up the country, and that this is all part of that. And this is what America wanted. And although I've said on this podcast before, is yeah, America voted for him. And so a lot of what's happening is stuff we could anticipate. But I think we're starting to see some of the impacts that really do hurt people, and that his focus is not on bringing down inflation and bringing down the price of eggs. His
Well,
focus is on other
in his
things.
defense, he can't help the bird flu, right?
Right, I get it. I get it. I'm not going to blame him for that. In
Yeah.
fact, that's the problem is that the eggs are going up not because of inflation, it's because that bird flu's for real. I mean, have you gone to a supermarket yet and see they have no eggs?
I have not seen that yet. I did buy a dozen eggs last week and they were a little over $6,
Okay,
which depending on where you are in the country, that's a good deal or a bad deal. And they were, the pasture raised eggs, so they're a little bit more
right.
expensive. But yeah,
Well,
some people are paying over $12.
right. And look, a month ago, I was in Florida and I was at Publix, which is a very well respected supermarket in the Florida area. And there were no eggs. And the funny part is that they're very clever is wherever eggs would have been, where you'd go to the egg sign and it would be empty, they had moved some cheese around. So you're in the aisle that says eggs, and you say, "Where are the eggs?
You
We
know,
don't have any."
I never read the book, but there's definitely a joke in there for anybody who read Who Moved My Cheese, right?
Yes.
Maybe
So
in reverse, I don't know.
it was just funny. It was just a very funny. And so you find yourself looking, like thinking, well, where am I missing the eggs? And again, in a normal supermarket where they're out of a product, there's just a blank space. And you go, there are no eggs. There's no milk.
Yeah, so it's
As
not.
as happens in all snowstorms in the Delaware Valley, where eggs, milk, and bread disappear because everyone has a unnatural need for French toast.
Yeah, it's not who moved my eggs, it's who moved my cheese, or not who moved my eggs rather. So that's interesting. So for anybody listening or watching, maybe you're watching and listening, we encourage you to leave some comments, email us. You're most likely watching, listening via YouTube. So you can go on to our channel. Please subscribe, if you like what we're saying, give us a like. It helps us with our channel getting exposure. And if you subscribe, then you'll get maybe a little heads up when we have our next episode. But leave comments, let us know what you're thinking, because these are definitely contentious issues, and we're curious how people who have different perspectives are thinking of things. And I guarantee you there is a point of view or multiple points of view that we did not consider. So please let us know what you're thinking. Let us know a different perspective. And we appreciate you tuning in to watch us.
Same here. Interesting. On a topic we talked about a couple weeks ago about the pardons. So one of the issues there is already one of the J6 defendants was involved in an altercation with police
I
and
saw
was
that.
shot yesterday.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see the reaction to that, right? Because people on the right are going to wonder, not all people on the right, but I imagine some people on the right are going to wonder if this was some type of retaliation, right? He came out against law enforcement as a whole. He attacked a member of the law enforcement community. That is a fraternity, and they definitely look out for each other. And I'm not saying this should be the leap in logic, but there will be people who view it that way. There will be other people, sadly, who view it and say, see, this guy was crazy. Look at what happened. Some people might even say he got what he deserved, which is awful to think that way. It's obviously a life. This man has a family, just whatever his opinions are. But, I don't know. I think a lot of the facts of what happened are yet to be released, right? Like,
Right.
I don't think we should be jumping to conclusions until we know the full story. Hopefully, there's some body cam footage. There are going to be a lot of circumstances there that need to be unpacked.
No, I think that's fair. But you also have probably someone who was a violent criminal who went to jail for a violent act, which was attacking the Capitol, and probably needed to stay in prison a little bit longer. It'll be interesting to see how that develops.
It will indeed. It will indeed.
So what's new on the wine side? I know that you're still doing dry January.
Yeah, what's new on the wine side is I haven't consumed any wine since January 7th, and we're sitting here at the 28th, so 3 weeks to the day. I'll do another week after I do my water fast get the autophagy going. And I don't know. I don't know. I save a lot of money when I'm not drinking, and I feel really good. I sleep better. Energy's up. So, I'm willing to bet, though, if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, I might have that be my first drink with an Eagles toast.
Well, that well, let's the fact that we're in the Super Bowl and I had the privilege of being at the game on Sunday. I have now I've watched 50 years of football in my life, and I have now seen two things in that building I'd never seen before. One was watching Saquon Barkley jump over somebody backwards, and that wasn't this weekend, but that was earlier in the season. And the other was having a referee describe to 70,000 raging fans that if the Washington Commanders committed another penalty, that he was going to literally he was going to award a touchdown to the Eagles, which is a good thing he was in Philadelphia and not giving that speech in Washington.
Right? Or it's a good thing when giving that speech in Philly, he was talking about awarding it to the Eagles and not the Commanders. Would have been a
Right.
very different story.
That was
So
good. But
I guess before we sign off, Eric, give everybody your Super Bowl prediction score.
so look, I think the Eagles are the best team in football this year. I think Patrick Mahomes may be the best quarterback ever. It's going to be one of those, you know, 35-33 kind of games for the Eagles. I if it's close, they're probably not going to win because our otherwise reliable field goal kicker has been somewhat less reliable this year.
Poor Jake Elliott. I don't know what. I mean, I keep telling myself maybe he has an injury that he's just fighting through, which is
Right.
affecting him. But I think it's more psychological.
Yeah. So I think look, I'm a homer. I think the Eagles actually will win this game, and I think they're going to win it, by a touchdown.
I'm predicting the Chiefs score either 17 or 23, and the Eagles put up over. And I know that Kansas City has a tough defense, but I'm going to say the Eagles put up somewhere between 27 and 33. I think
Okay.
they win fairly handily, and I know I'm biased, and I'm proud of my Eagles bias, but that's my prediction. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Go Birds.
Go Birds, or as the mayor said, eat.
One last thing before we sign off. One of my favorite memes that I've seen throughout the past week was somebody got an Eagles hat with the misspelling. They actually are creating hats that are misspelled the way that Mayor Sherelle Parker spelled it.
Look, she's a great lady. She's working really hard, and but it's kind of funny.
But she did go on Philadelphia Talk Radio to take to catch some flack after she did that. She was a good sport about it. And hey, if anybody's done any public speaking, and I know you've done a ton of it, Eric, you're constantly thinking of what are you going to say next. So I'll give that to her. Like she was probably just thinking, what have I got to say next? And she got way ahead of the letters.
Or
Anyway.
the other part about that is when you do speak publicly, as it's coming out of your mouth, you realize, oh God, what did I just say? So anyway, Rafe, have a good week and
Thanks, Eric.
go Birds. And
Go
thanks
Birds.
everybody for coming into the third edition of Pinot and Policy. Have a
There
good
we
night.
go. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
Bye bye.